I don't feel like, I know a lot of people saying that they want like Tick to come back, but I also feel like Tick, in order for the spell to work, Tick had to sort of, you know, commit the ultimate sacrifice. So if he undoes that, doesn't that undo the spell? But then we don't really understand how magic works that well because we were only given like a 15 to 20-minute lesson on it. Does that work? Are black people going to wake up and be able to do magic? Are they going to give magic to every black person? Because you know, all skin folk ain't kinfolk. They can go many different ways. Personally, I would rather see spin-offs though. Hello everyone, it is your boy Jabbar, the Kakashi Cowboy, back with another review of Lovecraft Country, the season finale, the last installation of Lovecraft Country. And I hope that, you know, the last two episodes, or the last couple episodes wouldn't be jam-packed with a whole bunch of stuff. So we get to this last episode, and it's very exposition heavy. There's a lot of talking going on, a lot of explaining, a lot of expository information um, that I really felt like should have been dealt with in episodes prior, so that we didn't have to like learn everything in like 15 to 20 minutes before the big sort of, you know, battle royale at the end of this episode, at the end of the season. And so we spend like we're literally the first 15 to 20 minutes, or maybe even 30 minutes of Hannah almost explaining her plan and, you know, her life story, and, you know, going over it with Tick, because they come back from 1921 Tulsa after it's burned down, after the massacres happened, with the book that they got from Grandma Hattie, to come and fix D. And when they say the incantation to fix D, they sort of get propelled, both Letty and Tick sort of get propelled into the book in a sort of this like dream, this sort of like dream vision quest thing that they have going on. They're in Tick's old house that he grew up in with his mother Doris, Grandma Hattie, and Grandma Hannah. And they're sort of all explaining to them what needs to be done in the plan. And it seems like Hannah has been planning this sort of black takeover of magic for a long time, possibly even a century's time. And we kind of have to get all of this through her talking and talking, and like, I just didn't find that enjoyable. It felt like all of this stuff that we should have learned about magic should have been done over the course of the season. And it seems like we have to learn about not only Hannah's story and her plan, we also have to learn about how magic works in this series as well, because we haven't really delved into how magic really works ever. Like, we've got little bits and pieces of things from Christina as we've seen her do magic, but we really haven't like seen any of the characters really deal with magic in any substantive way where they're learning. One of my favorite series, one of my favorite shows of all time, period. One of my favorite series that ever deals with magic and mysticism is Charmed. Charmed is one of my favorite series ever. And one thing that I really enjoyed about Charmed was watching like Prue, Piper, and Phoebe sort of as they are learning magic and learning how to use magic and learning, you know, the scope of what magic can do. So are you, the audience. You're learning along with them. I mean, it really makes it compelling to watch, to continuously learn about how magic works in their sort of story and their sort of world building. And I really felt like it's this last episode where they just sort of jam pack it with everything, and it really just isn't enjoyable because you have to like, it's almost like you're trying to take notes, but it's like, why am I taking notes? Because this might be the last and final season, and also it's the last and final episode as well. So it's like I have to sort of pay really close attention to like what they're saying and how magic works in terms of like, I think they were talking about location, purpose, intention, and the body. Like, those are the three components of magic or something like that. Also symbols are a big component of magic, and the size of the scope, the scale of the magic that you're trying to do also has to match the scale of this, how big the symbol like is supposed to be. I don't know why they didn't give us an episode with Hannah, where we sort of went back and sort of, you know, went back in time and sort of saw her story. Like, we go back in time and we see like Jiha, and we sort of have these episodes after like episode 5 or 4 where we sort of delve into certain people's lives who are important to the story, who are supposed to be like important to the story or to the broader aspect of the story of the series. But we never go into Hannah's life. But she turns out to be the most important figure in this whole series because she's planning a black takeover of magic and wiping magic from white people completely across the globe. Like she's literally the most important figure in this, but she never gets an episode. I really felt like her scenes when they conjure up Braithwaite again. They conjure up this white man. That was one of the most satisfying scenes out of this whole entire series. They conjure this white man up that used to own them, and they murder him. They conjure him like a Lazarus sort of demon or something like that. If you remember that from Charmed, they conjure him up just to kill him again, and it was really satisfying. He does end up getting away to warn Christina, which sort of like helps Christina in the end, but I'll get to that a little bit later. I really felt like her interactions with Braithwaite when he comes and they resurrect him, like you can see like she's really angry at him, and he's just so indifferent about it. Like I really love those moments, and I wish we could have gotten that in an episode all by itself, like seeing Hannah like devise her plan and an entire episode dedicated to her, seeing her sort of deal with the Braithwaites and what it was like in the Braithwaite manor originally, and how she came to learn magic and use magic and utilize magic and wed herself to the book and, you know, pass down the book from generation to generation. Like I really wanted, like that should have been an entire episode, and we never get it. Instead, we get 15 minutes of Hannah in this final episode where she has to spend most of the time doing this expository monologue. We also learned that Tick has to sort of give himself over, like he has to, you know, sacrifice himself in order for this plan to work, in order for the scale of this magic that they're trying to use to be fulfilled, that there has to be like an even equal, you know, greater sacrifice. And the greatest sacrifice of all is her giving, like, you know, her grandson over, killing her, essentially killing her grandson so that black people can have magic. And it really was, I really love the religious references in this idea that Hannah is almost like God planning like to save her people, and so that she sends her only grandson to, you know, sacrifice himself so that, you know, the black people can have and control magic. Like I really felt like that was really powerful, but I wish we had an episode. I'm going to continue to say this. I want an episode with Hannah. For the most part, for the rest of this episode, after Hannah, Hattie, and Doris all sort of cure Dee of, you know, the curse that's been put on her. They can't save her completely. Her arm is kind of gone and gone limp, and then her mother, Hippolyta, ends up, you know, later on trying to concoct this sort of like make this sort of mechanical arm we find out it's supposed to be. She sort of starts making her a mechanical arm or a robotic arm. So she's kind of, so they turn Dee into a kind of half cyborg. I love the idea of ancestors as like protectors and guiders even in the afterlife. I love that aspect of this series. I wish we had gotten more of it. I mean, we've kind of been getting little bits and pieces of it as we see Tick and Letty both have dreams of Hannah sort of guiding them through the Braithwaite house and sort of trying to mouth something to them. But we really haven't gotten I really enjoyed like this last episode where like the ancestors come back. And they're all black female ancestors. And it's sort of like the three of them, Hattie, Doris, and Hannah, it's almost like a holy trinity in a way, like a black female holy trinity. Of course, Christina has been warned by her great grandfather. She goes and she says, you know, I know you guys have the book. Can you just let me have it, and I'll find another way. I promise I'll find another way to do the spell that doesn't involve killing you. And essentially Tick is like no, because essentially Hannah has set them on this, you know, they're thinking something bigger. They're devising a plan that's even bigger than hers, which is immortality for herself. And I love this idea, like this, you know, juxtaposition of like they're working for something larger than themselves, while Christina is simply like she's really selfish. She's a really selfish ass person. She's been a selfish ass person. They tell her no. She takes away Letty's invulnerability to sort of like get back at them, or sort of like, you know, show them that she means business. But they continue on and move forward. We see Letty go and meet with Ruby to try to convince her, you know, at their mother's grave, trying to convince her that that she needs to help them sort of take down Christina. And there's this really nice exchange. I really felt like Ruby and Letty together, they have really nice scenes together. I feel like they have really great chemistry together whenever they're on screen together. I do enjoy them, even though I'm not a big fan of Ruby's character. I'm not a big fan of Ruby's character because she is kind of a sellout. She does kind of redeem herself at the end because she does try at least to get them. She does try to get them some of Christina's blood, like Christina plans to use for her spell to sort of gain immortality. Of course, that ends up in Ruby dying, which I'll get to a little bit later as well. But they have this really nice exchange. They don't talk about color. I thought in this moment, okay, we're finally gonna get commentary on their family life and colorism as well. The fact that Letty's father was probably white or something like that, and their mother, because they're at their mother's grave, they're talking about their mother, which also leads to discussion about them as sisters. And we don't get it. Like, you guys are not going to address the fact that Ruby's super dark skinned, Letty's really light skinned, the fact that they are probably half sisters and not whole sisters, the fact that there is a little bit of a colorism dynamic here. You're not gonna address that here. You're not gonna just like I thought this was the moment where we're gonna finally get the backstory. We got a little bit. We know that Letty was actually in jail, which is why she didn't come to her mother's funeral, even though she really didn't want to come anyway. So her being in jail was just kind of like a happenstance excuse, a good reason for why she couldn't come in the first place, even though she really didn't want to come anyway. That's all they kind of give us, and I'm just like, okay, this is all we're getting now. This last episode. We can't get any more about it, but no, they don't give it to us. Um, and essentially, I guess they leave the graveyard, and Letty tells her something. We get it. We don't really know what Letty tells her to make her change her mind. But she tells her something. I think she tells her maybe possibly that Christina took away her invulnerability. I think that's what leads Ruby to then going to be like, okay, I need to probably protect my sister because clearly Christina has taken back, her word. She gave me her word that she would protect my sister, but she just took her invulnerability. I think that's what it was kind of alluding to. I don't know why we couldn't just get that. Why we couldn't just get that? Why the screen had to cut off, and for us to sort of guess what Letty possibly said to Ruby. But I'm guessing that's why Ruby changes her mind because her one ask of Christina was, "I just want you to protect my sister. Just make sure that she doesn't get hurt." And I think Letty says essentially, we don't get it, but I think what Letty says is she took my invulnerability away, so I think she plans to kill me too. And so I think this leads Ruby to then going and like it's almost like she sacrifices her relationship with Christina to then go and try to steal some more blood. We of course learn that Christina, first of all, Ruby in these scenes with Christina was not being conspicuous at all. Like she's constantly looking like very funny, very weird. Even Christina's picking up on it, like what's wrong with you? What's going on? And like Christina's like not stupid, so I don't know why Ruby isn't putting on her game face when she devises this plan to go and take Christina's blood for the spell to give to them so they can use for their spell. Like it doesn't make any sense to me why Ruby like I don't understand. Like Ruby, Ruby was not trying to be conspicuous at all. She wasn't trying to hide it. Like she wasn't trying to be sneaky at all. Like I'm like, girl, you keep looking at the bottle so hard. Like you keep looking at this bottle of Christina's blood really, really hard. Like you're planning to do something with it. And Christina's not a dummy. Like she sees you looking at the bottle. Like Christina even looks at her and looks at the bottle and looks back at her as like, what is she thinking about? Like, but yeah, when Ruby shows up, it's a very big surprise. It's a very big reveal. Like, I didn't expect it coming either until it finally happened, and Ruby started acting all weird when her and Letty were in the sort of like a watchtower back at the Braithwaite Manor. And they're sort of devising their plan or whatever, or going back or setting up. And then Ruby starts talking all weird, not like herself. And I'm like, oh shit, that's not even Ruby, is it? Because I did have a feeling when Ruby when Ruby showed up when they were about to go on their little car trip back to the Braithwaite Manor, back to Arden, and she gave her this huge bottle filled with like Christina's blood, and like the bottle wasn't that filled with blood. The bottle wasn't that filled with blood when, you know, Ruby was looking at it when Christina was devising her plan. It was only a little bit. And so she gave her this full thing of blood. And so I was kind of like, where did she get all that blood from? But then turns out is that Christina caught her all along. Christina doesn't say that she killed her, but Christina sort of alludes to the fact that she might have killed her. And this is when Letty and sort of Ruby slash Christina, because Christina transformed and used Ruby's blood to Christina used Ruby's blood to turn into Ruby, and they sort of have this sort of battle and then sort of showdown where Letty punches Christina slash Ruby in the face, and they sort of are all struggling. This big struggle in the watchtower. This scene kind of pissed me off just a little bit. It pissed me off just a little bit because at one point, you know, Letty actually, you know, like unlatches the bottom of the floor. It has, you know, sort of Christina slash Ruby hanging on. She's about to fall, but she's hanging on for dear life. And like, instead of Letty just going over to her and kicking her down the fucking, I don't know what do you ever want to call it, instead of her just kicking her downward, like she goes over to go and grab some big wood block stick. And I'm just like, why are you doing this? I guess they did it like, this to me was very bad writing. Like when writers are trying to like add suspense into like these very action-packed scenes, and so they have like these moments where they need like, oh my goodness, is she gonna fall? Is she gonna win? And then so they sort of have the character do this very nonsensical thing that doesn't make any sense at all in terms of the fight that's happening right then and there, so that way the other person can get back up and then they can knock him out and then they can do all that. And so it's just like, it doesn't make any sense to me. And it's just so that Ruby slash Christina can get back up, choke Letty out, and then throw her off the watchtower. And then throw her off the watchtower so that we can think that when Letty hits the ground that she's dead. And so that it can even like create more suspense later on as Christina then goes on to then, you know, tie Tick up and sort of drench herself in his blood and sort of become immortal. And it's just like the whole setup is just it's just nonsensical to me. It didn't make any sense to me why Christina would then give Letty the invulnerability spell either. Like why would Christina then say the invulnerability spell as Letty is falling to her death, so that Letty can wake back up and then come back and fight her? Like it doesn't make, none of this makes sense, and it only makes sense in terms of the writers want to create a suspenseful moment here at the end. And they want to keep us on the edge of our seats, but it's not done in a logical way, in a sensical way that actually like goes along with characters' actions. Like, why would Christina, if her end goal is to become this all-powerful immortal being, why would she open the door and leave the door open for Letty to come back to life? Like, I guess we're supposed to maybe infer that, like, Christina actually is keeping her promise to Ruby, that she actually was in love with Ruby. But, like, that doesn't make any sense either, because Christina... like, Christina is all about herself. Like, Christina has always shown herself to be a selfish person, that she's willing to kill her own family. She says even in that moment where she's talking to Letty, like the car ride, they have this really nice car ride on the way up to Artem where they're sort of singing these songs and having this sort of road trip moment. And it's a really nice moment before they go into battle. They're all in Woody. They're all in, you know, Woody is the car. And they're having this really nice familial moment with each other. And she even says, like, you know, I kind of understand, you know, for once in my life, you know, what family kind of means, you know, but I killed mine, so oh well. Like, this is what she says to Letty. Like, Christina is a legit sociopath. Why, if Christina is so cold that she would kill her own family members, why would she, and she would use her family members to then achieve her own goals of immortality, why would she then leave the door open for Letty to come back and, you know, undo all of her stuff, undo all of what she did? Why would she even leave that door open? Like, Christina's way too smart to do that. So this really made no sense. I think they were trying to allude to the fact that Christina was actually keeping her promise to Ruby. But if Christina also killed Ruby, why would she give a fuck about keeping her promise to Ruby? Like, this doesn't, none of it made any sense. I did enjoy the sort of final scenes where uh, Tick is sort of strapped in like Jesus Christ. There's a lot of religious imagery going on here, and it's sort of played on and almost flipped in a way. They have Christina here sort of doing the crucifixion, and drenching Trench. She slices both of uh, Tick's arms. I was also wondering where these sort of like children of the corn people came from. They just sort of pop up out of nowhere, and it's really eerie. Like they just sort of pop up out of nowhere, and then they just sort of disappear afterwards. It's very strange to me. It's never explained. Like, where were these people the entire time? Like, where were they? Like, we never see any interactions between anybody. We never see any interactions between Christina and maybe possibly other people that she's working with or working for. Like, we get a little bit like, what happened to the black guy who had those pages in that briefcase? Like, where did these white people come from? We didn't get any of this in other episodes, and it just sort of like makes no sense to me, like how these sort of henchmen just show up. These like children, they just show up and appear like the children of the corn, and they just disappear at the end like they were never there in the first place. So I really did like the scene where the children of the corn, white people, come and meet Jiha, Montrose, and Hippolyta on the bridge. Like, I really love that scene, seeing Hippolyta fight, seeing Hippolyta and both Montrose fight side by side. Hippolyta using her sort of, Amazonian training to sort of kick these white people's asses. Like, I really enjoyed that scene. Like, to see like her use her warrior training now against these white people. I wish we had gotten more of that scene instead of this sort of, not because it sort of flipped back and forth between that scene and also the Christina and Letty fighting scene, and I would really much rather have seen Hippolyta beat these white people's asses because she was really tearing them up, boy. Her and Montrose. Jiha, oh, that's another thing I want to talk about. Jiha was completely useless. Like, Jiha, I'm like, if you don't unleash this nine-tailed demon and to kill these white people, like, what are you here for? She is literally only here so that when everything goes wrong, she can then connect Tick, and then she can use her nine tails to connect Tick and then connect Christina together so that Letty can then complete the spell that they had originally planned in the first place. Like, it's just like Jiha is completely like, she's literally just a plot device. Jiha is she doesn't become a person anymore. She's literally just a plot device. They try to do this sort of human interaction where Tick goes and tries to atone for his sins, and he tries to like go back to Jiha and so ask for he sort of repents and asks for forgiveness with each other, and I really like that scene and interaction with each other. It did feel a little bit exploitative, a little bit at first, but then we come to find out that Tick is really just trying to atone for his sins in the end before he goes on, because he knows he has to sacrifice himself. There's still I like the way they sort of play on the fact that there's still a little bit of hope that like Tick could possibly survive, even though in the end we figure out that he wrote this whole letter because he knows he's not going to survive. He knows that the original plan that he has to sacrifice himself has to go through in order for black people to obtain magic. Henchmen they bring in Hippolyta, Montrose, and Jiha all in, but then they disappear at the end, and I'm just like, where did they go? We of course see Letty come back to life because the mark of invulnerability has been placed back on her, and so she starts trying to chant even though Tick is already dying, Tick thinks that Letty is dead but they get to see each other one final time before he passes away. They already kind of know what has to happen, and that Letty has to go through with it, and that he has to go through with dying as well. And again, we see the whole crucifixion scene. Building comes crumbling down on Christina, and she's sort of trapped under these rocks. She's still alive though, which is kind of interesting to me. How is she still alive? Letty sort of explains to Christina that she took away magic from all white people, including herself, and that is theirs now. And they sort of leave her, and they take Tick's body, and they sort of do this kind of, it's this interesting sort of homegoing experience where they walk with like the body of his sheathed body back to, I guess, the car. And it's really interesting. I thought it was I thought it was powerful, but I also was like, they're just gonna leave this white woman here, and they don't disappoint at the end. Diana, Dee has been in the woods the entire time. She's been reading this comic book, this like future comic book that she's written that her mother gave her. And she sort of details, essentially she's reading, I don't know if she's reading, is she reading her own work? I think we're supposed to assume that she's reading her own work, and she's sort of reading and talking about how, they haven't learned yet, that they have to spill the blood of somebody, of someone other than their own, in order for there to be peace or something like that. I think that's how it goes. And then we see sort of the monsters, the I keep calling them vampire dogs. They come out, the white pale vampire dogs come out. But then we see sort of Tick's vampire dog. We eventually realize that Tick also sort of did a spell where, like, that vampire dog, the black one, I'm calling him Blackie. He, Blackie, he sort of like, creates this connection between him and Dee, so that Blackie will always protect Dee, no matter what, after he's gone, because he's already sort of planning to die. We see this when we sort of get visions of the past, of what happened to not only to Ruby but also what happened with Tick. When Jiha is sort of like infusing them and connecting them together with her nine tails, and so we get flashbacks of her. We get flashbacks of her with Tick, and he's sort of creating a spell for the dog to protect him, the vampire dog Blackie to protect Diana, and I thought that was really interesting. That Diana shows up with her own, bionic arm, her robotic arm, and she's like, they haven't learned yet, and it's clearly a reference to her family and also black people within itself, that like black people are constantly giving themselves for this nation and this country, which I thought was really powerful. Like, context of it is said in such few words. I think that's why it's so powerful to me, is because like black people are always giving themselves for the greater good of this country. And it's time that like black people be selfish a little bit, like, and also protect themselves, and that means you're gonna have to kill some white people. How are you gonna leave this white woman here alive for her to sort of figure out a way to get magic back? She's very smart, she's very intelligent, and she's very resourceful. She could easily like come back and like undo everything that you just did. Why would you leave her here? And so Dee ends up doing the job of her parents and her elders, honestly. And it's a very eerie image, because on one hand she's making a good point, but on the other hand, we almost see Diana lose her innocence in this moment. Like, she's not a little girl anymore. Like, she's kind of like a grown woman. She's kind of an adult. This is like her moment where her innocence is lost, because she has to sort of do what her elders won't. And it's like a melancholy moment. It's kind of like it's a I think everybody sort of did their fist up like, yes, kill this white woman. But it's also kind of a sad moment to sort of see a child have to step into an adult role, because the adults aren't willing to like do the adult thing. An idea that like black children do lose their innocence at a very young age, that black children are not allowed to be innocent, because they're kind of not. We even see this theme of black child innocence being lost, even with like Emmett Till, the whole storyline of Emmett Till going on throughout this series. So, this idea of, black children losing their innocence, is something that I also found interesting, that this series has played on a lot. I don't know if there's going to be a second season, so I don't really want to go into too much, like, in-depth like analysis of how the next season might be, because we don't even know if they're going to do one. I would personally not even have. I don't really care to have another season of this series. I would rather spin-offs. Like, I think that this would be a great show to do spin-offs for. Like, I would love to see a spin-off, like I said before, of Montrose and what he went through in the past. I would love to see a spin-off of Diana and her mother going on these adventures together, like these comic book adventures together. I would love to see a spin-off of Letty's future child, George, and how he deals with magic, and possibly being, taught how to use magic by his mother, Letty. I would love to see that. I would love to see that. I don't really care to like continue on in any like way about the series though. Like I feel like it ended the best way that it can with what it was with what we were given. I do feel like if they do come back for a second season, that if they want to play with the lodges, because there is still like 34 lodges out there, sort of just out there that just reference, but we never get to see. So I'm wondering if like if they do another season, will they have the lodges then coming after them to sort of regain magic because they wake up one day and they won't be able to use magic, and so they're like, how do we not be able to use magic, and will they then come after Letty and Hippolyta and Dee and Montrose then, and also her child? Like I'm just wondering, and we could also do this as like a fast forward. Like we don't have to like pick up right where we left off. I don't feel like I know a lot of people saying that they want like Tick to come back, but I also feel like Tick, in order for the spell to work, Tick had to sort of, you know, commit the ultimate sacrifice. So if he undoes that, doesn't that undo the spell? But then we don't really understand how magic works that well because we were only given like a 15 to 20-minute lesson on it. Does that work? Are black people going to wake up and be able to do magic? Are they going to give magic to every black person? Because all skin folk ain't kinfolk. They can go many different ways. Personally, I would rather see spin-offs though. I would love to see a spin-off of Dee and Diana, Diana and Hippolyta. I would love to see a spin-off of Diana and Hippolyta especially. Maybe even a spin-off of George Freeman, Letty's child, future child as well. I understand that like people are very excited when like new black art comes about, especially black art that we haven't really seen yet or haven't really seen done yet. But that doesn't mean it can't be critiqued. That doesn't mean that we should suspend our critiques of it just to say, okay, well, we'll accept anything or whatever. Like it can still be critiqued. That way that art can get better. That's the whole reason for critique in the first place, is that so art can get better, so that we can get black art that is better produced and also better written, so that we can better enjoy it. And just because we critique something harshly doesn't mean that we didn't enjoy it in the first place. Like I still enjoyed and loved this whole ride and this whole series of doing this entire series. But please let me know in the comments below about what you thought about this last episode of the final of this first season. Also, what you thought about the season as a whole. Did you like it? Did you enjoy it? Did you also have certain issues with it? Also, if you would like me to do other series that are coming up, or that know of that are coming up that you'd like me to go and look at, I would love to do that as well. I'd love to take suggestions on this channel now that I am at 200 subscribers. Thank you so much, everybody, for the 200 subscribers and getting me past that mark. And I will see you all next time for the next video.